Hey guys, and welcome back to another episode of Was It Woke? So today we're going to be talking about season 1 of Jurassic World Chaos Theory, the animated series on Netflix. As usual, I'm going to run it through my normal criteria, give it a score to determine how exactly woke it was, and go from there. So let's get started. Number one is racial diversity. So this show has always had an element of diversity in it. It has felt a little forced to a certain extent, starting off with the main six characters. You've had a black kid, a black boy, a white boy, a Asian boy. Then with the girls, you have a Latina girl, a Mexican girl, and a white girl, or a Middle Eastern girl. I'm sorry. It's like it's completely diverse, the main cast, but it's not a problem in the sense that it's just they're all good characters. They're well developed. So the diversity of them, you look past it. It's not doesn't even though it is forced from, I guess, a production standpoint. Once the story gets going, you don't think of it at all. So it's slightly there, but not really. So I'm just going to give a 3 out of 10 for racial diversity. Number two is LGBTQ representation. So this is a big one for this series because you obviously have the relationship between Sammy and Yaz, which was established in the final season of Camp Cretaceous, the previous show that leads into Chaos Theory. And so now they're grown up more in this series and, their relationship there, and it's explored more in more detail, their lesbian relationship. What do I think of it? So again, it did feel forced in that final season of Camp Cretaceous. I felt it was very much shoehorned in at the end there. It didn't feel like a natural progression of their relationship. They were completely platonic and friendly, and then all of a sudden they just started showing lesbian feelings for one another. But that said, their relationship is done in a three-dimensional way. Now, you could still say it is forced. They have an agenda at play here where they want to show all sorts of relationships on top of diversity and all sorts of things, but their relationship is treated seriously, and it's not pushed in any way to kind of highlight it, or it's not like they have characters in the show who are purposely like bigoted or anything like that. They just show them they're just a lesbian couple. That's just how it is. It's completely normal, which you can say go both ways with that. You could say that is what the forced agenda tries to do, is to normalize it, but then at the same time, gay people exist. They exist. When can you have them in these sorts of properties? When is it no? Do you cross that line between forced and natural? This one to me is teeters on the edge there, and so I'm very much in the middle and torn on this one, because to me the starting premise of this relationship was very much a forced agenda, but at the same time it's done naturally, and they treat the relationship with respect, and they don't treat the other characters as like trying to worship them as some sort of amazing thing that they're lesbians. No, it's just treated as normal. So I'm half and half on that, and so for that, predictably, I'm going to give a 5 out of 10 for LGBTQ representation. Number three is toxic masculinity / feminist messaging. This one, again, there is elements of it here. I would say it's not really overt about either one of those. It doesn't go down any particular path with either of those messaging. But what I will say is, more often than not, the male characters in the show are presented as either being cowardice or stupid or like bigoted in some sort of way. Whereas the female characters are always kind of, they're the morally correct ones. They're the stronger ones, the ones that are more capable. They know how to kick ass. They know how to handle every situation more often than not. Yes, there are exceptions. Yes, there are men who are definitely competent in this show. And there's also female characters who have flaws, like Yaz, who's dealing with anxiety and all that sort of thing. So there's a bit of both going on both ends there. But it is kind of an overarching thing that I see affecting most media today, where they want to bring men down a peg and women up a peg. And I see that definitely still at play here in this show. And just to touch back on the racial diversity aspect, it's funny that the show is quite diverse in terms of the types of nationalities and that you get in the show. Yet when it comes to the bad guys, it's almost always a white male. Like, it's just always that case. Pretty much, you do have a psychotic female lady in the show, that's for sure. She's there. She doesn't say a word, and she's psychotic. But for the most part, most of the bad guys are just white guys, and so. And that is a thing that's called the overarching thing that's happening throughout all of Hollywood at the moment, throughout most media, and that is very much prevalent here. And so for that, I am giving a 5 out of 10 for toxic masculinity / feminist messaging. Number four is traditions bad, progressivism good. So this one, it doesn't really address either of those. It doesn't really say that traditions are bad or progressivism is good or vice versa in any way. But what I will say is that the show in its existence by nature is sort of progressive, obviously with the lesbian relationship, with the diversity, all the things that are just sort of baked into the existence of the show is pretty progressive by nature. You know, even the messaging about protecting animals, environment, all these sorts of things are very much aligned with the progressive side of the aisle. But that said, there is a line and a moment in this show that was one of my favorite scenes of the season, and I thought it was quite profound. You know, it's a kid show at the end of the day as well, but it's where Sammy is telling Yaz, you know, Yaz is basically running away from her fields, living in this colony that's kind of hidden away from the rest of the world, and she thinks that this is the way to deal with her anxiety. And Sammy tells her, you know, this is not sustainable. You cannot hide forever. You have to face your fears at some point. It's the only way to conquer them and to come through them and to grow and get stronger. And that's a profound lesson. It's a very basic one that we've heard a million times before. But you know, this is a kid show, and I thought that was quite profound. But the other thing is that I feel like in today's world, we're handing out participation trophies all the time, that kind of message gets lost these days. So it's really nice to see that reflected again in this kid show, and to remind children or anyone watching the show that, you know, we can't just hide, and you can't be protected, or, you know, live in a bubble from the rest of the world. You have to face your fears. You're going to encounter people who are different from you, disagree with you, or scare you, or situations that are going to test you in all sorts of ways. And that's part of life, and you have to embrace that. It's the only way to live and to grow. And so I thought that's a great message to have there, and I'll give them credit for that, because that harkens back to the idea of tradition, and being, you know, traditions being like, you know, growing as an individual and all these sorts of messages, and it's great stuff there. But as I've said, the progressivism is definitely very much baked into this show's existence. And so considering all these things, I'm going to give a 4 out of 10 for traditions bad, progressivism good. The fifth and final criteria is anti-capitalism / pro-socialism. So this is a kid's show. You're not really hearing those sorts of words in this sort of a setting. But that said, I want to mention a couple characters who do pop up in this show that do kind of represent where this show, what it feels about certain people. So you have a character named Carl, who is a neighbor to Sammy on this farm. He has acreage, and basically some fence gets broken on his property. He comes along and he's all raging and that about them, you know, trespassing on his property, you know, and he's presented as being a mean-spirited guy, a nasty person, and all of that, kind of a redneck sort of thing. And they have him wearing a red hat. Now, the red hat doesn't have anything written on it, but it is a red hat, and I feel like it is kind of an overt reference to a certain politician. I won't talk about who, though. I think you know who we're talking about. And then at the same time, you have another character named Bobby Nublar, who's basically hoarding dinosaurs, and he's exploiting them for show and for amusement and all sorts of things. And they take him down, and they very much present him as a bad guy too. And so they're showing the idea that if you, yes, animal exploitation is bad, but there's levels to this, and they're showing that anyone who would wish to make gain out of these animals, aka capitalism, is inherently a bad person. You know, say what you will about that. There is a moral arguments that I understand, but it's very much taking a hardline stance that anyone that wishes to do anything with these animals that could profit a dime is a bad person. But otherwise, no real mention to capitalism or socialism either way. And so for that, I'm going to give a 4 out of 10 for anti-capitalism / pro-socialism. And so we take the total of those 5 criteria, which in this instance equals 21. We take that 21 and we divide it by the 5 criteria, and that equals 4.2, which is a little woke. For reference, based on my criteria, if it had crossed the 5-point mark, it would have landed into the pretty woke territory. And so a 4.2 is very much leaning towards that territory of being pretty woke, but I don't think it's quite there yet. And so I have to settle on a little woke if I'm being fair. And I think perhaps the saving grace for chaos theory in this instance from being a little woke as opposed to pretty woke is that when I assess the diversity of this film and all the aspects that make up its wokeness, what I see is very much a show that has put story and characters at the forefront as the priority, but then has, once they've established those things, they've then seen, okay, how can we then implement, you know, racial diversity, LGBTQ representation, all these sorts of things. And they've definitely peppered them throughout the show, and that's been the case since Camp Cretaceous as well. But what I will say is, and I always want to give credit to this, is that, and this is what I always call for, is that story and character must come first. And I firmly believe, and I gave a good review of this series in my review of this show, and I thought they definitely did a good job, good to great job actually, of making a really decent story with fleshed out characters. And that's what I want at the end of the day. get that for me first, get me going and excited about those sorts of things. And then you can sprinkle those things in if you like later on. And I feel like that's firmly the case here with Jurassic World Chaos Theory. So make with that as you will. If you are a parent out there watching the show and you are wondering if it's acceptable for your kids to be watching, that's very much an independent decision you got to make on your own. I'm not going to be saying that for you because, as I said, I think on the one hand the story and the characters are really good and it's great storytelling and it's fun entertainment for kids for the most part. At the same time, it definitely has woke elements in it. There's no getting away from those. They're definitely there, but they are secondary. And so I guess it just comes down to you and how you value the importance of those things within the greater story of the entertainment that you're consuming. And so, yeah, I'll leave that for you to decide. But yeah, as for me, I'm determining this to be a little woke. So there you have it, guys. The first season of Jurassic World Chaos Theory is a little woke. That's my thoughts on it. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comment section below. Did you think it was woke? Did you think it wasn't? I want to hear them all if you agree or disagree with me. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and subscribe to my channel, and we'll talk to you next time. Bye.